The millionaire entered the asylum determined to bring it down. I didn't know that among the inmates was a lost piece of the past. Looking into the eyes of a silent old woman, the world stopped. It was his mother, missing for 25 years, and alive. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you are watching us. We continue. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty windows of the Santa Clara Asylum. Riccardo Muller adjusted his Italian silk tie and took a deep breath, trying to ignore the musty smell that permeated the air. His Italian leather shoes echoed down the rundown hallway as he followed the asylum's director, a middle-aged woman who droned on and on about the institution's financial difficulties. "As you can see, Mr. Muller, we do our best with the limited resources we have," she gestured nervously, pointing to the peeling walls. "But maintaining a centuries-old structure like this—" Riccardo interrupted her with an impatient gesture. "Ms. Marta, we've already evaluated the property. The documents are ready. We just need your signature." He opened the leather briefcase he was carrying, taking out a stack of papers. "The price offered is more than fair, considering the condition of the place." The director hesitated, her eyes darting down the hallway where a few elderly people lounged in worn chairs. "But Mr. Muller, what will happen to our residents? Many have been here for decades. Transfer to other institutions is provided for in the contract," he replied dryly, holding out a Mont Blanc pen. "Everything will be done within the law." It was at that moment that something inexplicable happened. A soft, trembling voice cut through the air, coming from a bench partially hidden in the shadows of the hallway. "Ricky, my little Ricky of the heart." Riccardo froze. That nickname. No one had called him that in over 30 years. It was like a distant echo from his childhood, a memory he had buried along with so many others. He slowly turned toward the voice. Sitting on the worn wooden bench was an elderly woman with grey hair and deep blue eyes, her wrinkled face lit up with a tender smile as she extended a trembling hand towards him. "It's you, isn't it? My boy." The principal looked confused. "Ah, this is Mrs. Helena. She rarely talks to anyone." Riccardo felt something strange in his chest, a sensation he couldn't name. Those eyes, there was something familiar about them, something that transported him to long-forgotten memories. He tried to ignore it, to get back to business, but his hands were shaking slightly as he held the documents. "Mrs. Marta," his voice came out hoarser than usual. "Who is this lady?" "Donna Helena has been with us for a long time," the director replied, flipping through a clipboard. "More than 20 years, at least. She was hospitalized after an accident and lost part of her memory. She has no known family." The old woman continued to look at Riccardo with disconcerting intensity. "You've grown so much, but your eyes are the same eyes as your father." Riccardo felt his blood run cold. His father? Impossible. His parents had died in an accident when he was a child. Aunt Raffaella, his mother's sister, had told him everything. She raised him, shaped his education, and transformed him into the successful businessman he was today. But something in that voice, in that look, made his seemingly solid world shake to its foundations. How do you know me?" he asked, his voice betraying a vulnerability he hadn't shown in years. Helena smiled again, that smile that seemed to carry 1,000 secrets. "I sang you to sleep. Remember the little bluebird song? You never slept without it." Riccardo staggered slightly. The song of the little bluebird, a nearly forgotten melody, began to echo in his mind, bringing with it fragments of memory, a cozy room, the smell of lavender, a sweet voice singing softly. "That's impossible," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. But his body betrayed his words. His hands were shaking, his heart was beating wildly, and a strange sense of recognition was spreading through his chest. The director watched the scene with growing interest. "Mr. Muller, do you know Donna Helena?" Riccardo didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the old woman, who was now humming a familiar tune softly, a tune that only his mother knew, a song she had invented especially for him, a song that should have died 25 years ago, along with its childhood memories. Ricardo left the Santa Clara asylum with his mind in turmoil. The purchase documents, not yet signed, weighed like lead in his briefcase. Sitting in the back seat of his armored Mercedes, he loosened his tie, trying to breathe. The voice of that lady, Helena, still echoed in his ears, awakening feelings that he thought were buried in the past. "To the office, sir?" the driver asked, watching him in the rearview mirror. "No," Ricardo replied after a moment's hesitation. "Go home and cancel my appointments for the rest of the day." As the car glided through the busy city streets, Ricardo closed his eyes, letting long-suppressed memories drift away. Helena's face, there was something about it that disturbed him deeply. Those blue eyes, they were the same ones that watched him every morning in the mirror. Arriving at his penthouse in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, Ricardo went straight to his private office. There, amid awards and photographs documenting his rise, in the business world, was a small wooden box that he rarely opened. Today, however, something compelled him to revisit his past. With slightly trembling hands, he opened the box. The smell of old wood brought with it a wave of nostalgia. Among the yellowed newspaper clippings and old letters, he found what he was looking for, a photo album faded with time. The first few pages showed pictures of his childhood with Aunt Rafaela. She had always been so elegant, so controlling, shaping every aspect of his life. But as he turned to a particularly old page, something caught his eye. A partially faded photograph showed a young woman holding a baby. The woman's face was partially blurred, but her eyes, they were the same blue eyes he had encountered today at the nursing home. "Impossible," he muttered to himself, feeling his heart race. The story he knew was clear. His parents had been in an accident when he was only 3 years old. Aunt Rafaela took custody of him, raised him as her own son, turned him into the man he was today. It was a story he never questioned, never had reason to doubt. But now, looking at that old photograph, something didn't add up. Why had she never seen this photo before? Why had Aunt Rafaela never shown her pictures of her mother? And why? Why did that lady at the nursing home know such intimate details of her childhood? He picked up his cell phone and dialed a number he rarely used. After 3 rings, a deep voice answered. "Matteo, I need your services. It's a delicate matter, and urgent." Matteo was more than a private investigator. He was an expert at unearthing inconvenient truths. Ricardo had hired him a few times to investigate business partners, but never for something so personal. "I need you to investigate someone, a lady named Helena, who was admitted to the Santa Clara Asylum over 20 years ago. I want everything. Admission documents, medical records, anything that explains how she got there." As he gave the instructions, his eyes never left the old photograph. The young woman was smiling at the camera, holding the baby so lovingly. Why did that image affect him so much? A knock on the door startled him. It was his secretary. "Mr. Muller, your aunt is on the line. She says it's urgent." Ricardo felt a shiver run down his spine. Aunt Rafaela never called without warning, much less in the middle of the day. It was as if she had a sixth sense for moments like this. "Tell me I'll come back later," he replied, hurriedly putting the photograph away in the album. He turned, his attention back to the phone. "Matteo, one more thing. I want absolute discretion in this investigation. No one can know, especially my aunt." After hanging up, Ricardo remained motionless in his chair, watching the city through the panoramic window of his office. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. Somewhere at that very moment, a blue-eyed lady was probably watching the same sunset, carrying with her secrets that could change everything he thought he knew about his own life. And for the first time in a long time, Ricardo Muller, the ruthless business tycoon, felt afraid of what he might discover. 3 days had passed since the meeting at the asylum. Ricardo could barely sleep, haunted by Helena's blue eyes and the melody of the little bluebird that kept echoing in his mind. On the morning of the 4th day, Matteo, the private investigator, arrived at his office carrying a thick folder. "Mr. Muller, What I found is disturbing, Matteo said, placing the folder on the mahogany desk. Donna Helena's admission documents contain serious irregularities. Ricardo shifted in his chair, feeling his heart race. What kind of irregularities? To begin with, the date. According to official records, she was admitted after a car accident in 2000, but I found earlier records in another hospital that show that she had already been institutionalized since 1998. And the strangest thing, these earlier records were all erased from the system. Ricardo took the documents with trembling hands. The dates coincided exactly with the period in which, according to Aunt Raffaella, his parents had suffered the accident. But there was more. There's something else, Matteo continued, pulling out an old photograph. I found this in the archives of the first hospital. The patient arrived there completely disoriented, but she had this photo in her pocket. The image showed a beautiful young woman with the same blue eyes as Helena holding a baby in front of a beach house. On the back was a date. Summer 1995. Ricardo, 3 years old. That's impossible, Ricardo murmured, his voice shaking. Aunt Raffaella told me that there were no photos from that time, that everything had been lost in the accident. Mr. Muller, Matteo hesitated before continuing. There is something else. I managed to locate a former nurse from the first hospital. She remembered Donna Helena because, according to her, a woman who looked very much like the patient visited regularly, always very well dressed and elegant. But at a certain point, this woman signed transfer papers, and Helena was taken to the Santa Clara Asylum. Ricardo felt his blood run cold in his veins. A woman who looked like Helena. Was that possible? His Aunt Raffaella had always been reserved about her past, especially about her mother. Now fragments of memory were beginning to fit together. The identical blue eyes, the way she spoke, small gestures that he had always associated with his aunt. I need more information about my aunt, Ricardo said, his voice taking on a determined tone. Raffaella Alvaran. I want everything. Medical records, personal documents, anything that might explain this connection. Matteo nodded, but before he could respond, the office door opened. Raffaella Alvarin, elegant as ever in her impeccable suit, entered the room. Her blue eyes, the same eyes as Helena's, narrowed as she saw the open folder on the desk. Ricardo, my dear, what a surprise to find you here at this hour, she said, her casual tone contrasting with the tension evident on her face. And who is your pop friend? Ricardo stood up slowly, feeling a growing anger mixed with confusion. Aunt Raffaella, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about paying a visit to the Santa Clara Asylum. Do you know the place? Raffaella's face paled for a split second, but she quickly regained her composure. That old place? Why would I know about it? It's curious, Ricardo continued, picking up the old photograph, because I found this image. And the woman in the photo, well, she looks remarkably like you, or would it be like Donna Helena? Raffaella crossed the room with firm steps and snatched the photograph from Ricardo's hands. Her eyes, normally cold and controlled, now shone, with something close to panic. Where did you get that? She hissed, her voice shaking slightly. Those things from the past should stay buried, Ricardo, for your own good. My dear, Ricardo laughed humorlessly. What else did you bury, Aunt Raffaella? What other lies are there in the story you told me? Raffaella straightened her shoulders, regaining her authoritative posture. You don't know what you're talking about. Everything I did was to protect you. Some truths are too dangerous to reveal. At that moment, Ricardo's cell phone vibrated. It was a text message from the director of the nursing home. Mr. Muller, Donna Helena is asking for you. She has something important to show you. An old diary. Raffaella noticed the change in her nephew's face when he read the message. His eyes widened in panic. No, she exclaimed, completely losing her composure. You can't go there. You can't. Talk to her. But Ricardo had already made his decision. Years of doubts and lies were beginning to make sense, and he would not stop until he discovered the whole truth. The Santa Clara Asylum seemed even darker at dusk. Ricardo walked through the corridors with hurried steps, ignoring the protests of his aunt who followed him. The director was waiting for them at the door of Helena's room, holding a notebook bound in worn leather. She was very agitated today, the director explained quietly. She was rummaging through an old trunk until she found this. She said she had to give it to her son. Rafaela tried to intercept the diary, but Ricardo was faster. Helena was sitting by the window, her face illuminated by the last rays of sunlight. When she saw him, her eyes shone with a surprising lucidity. "You came," she smiled, holding out her hand. "I knew you would. The diary, it tells everything. What your aunt did. What your father told you to do." "Shut up, Helena." Rafaela advanced, but Ricardo stopped her with a firm gesture. "No, aunt, no more silence, no more lies." He opened the diary with trembling hands, beginning to read aloud. March 15th, 1998. "Today, Rafaela came again. She brought papers for me to sign. She said it was for Ricardo's own good. But I saw the fear in her eyes when I mentioned Anton. She's afraid I'll remember, that I'll tell the truth about the empire he built." Rafaela let out a muffled sob. Ricardo continued reading. March 20th, 1998. "The nurses are constantly changing my medicine. I'm confused, but I still remember my son's face. Rafaela says he's fine, that he's being educated in the best schools. But why can't I see so much silence?" "Anton." Ricardo looked up from his diary, staring at his aunt. "Who's Anton?" Helena replied before Rafaela could intervene. "Anton Muller, the most powerful man in the country, your biological father." The shock hit Ricardo like a bolt of lightning. Anton Muller was a legend in the business world, owner of an empire that spanned several sectors. The same man who, coincidentally, was the main investor in the Santa Clara Asylum. "No!" Rafaela screamed, trying to snatch the diary from Ricardo's hands. "You don't understand. It was all to protect him. Anton would destroy you both if the truth came out. He was married. He had a reputation to protect. Helena was just a fling gone wrong. An affair." Helena's voice shook with indignation. "I was the mother of his child. But you always envied me, sister. You always wanted what was mine. When you found out about the baby, you saw your chance. You manipulated everything, forged documents, kept me drugged for years." Ricardo staggered, leaning against the wall. The words hit him like physical blows. Helena was his mother, Rafaela his aunt, and his real father was Anton Muller, the tycoon he had always admired from afar, never suspecting the connection. "The accident," he murmured, the pieces falling into place. "There was no accident, was there?" Rafaela slumped into a chair, defeated. "It was Anton's idea. He arranged everything. The fake documents, the hospitalization, the change of identity. I just followed the plan. Raising you as my nephew, keeping Helena hidden, it was the only way to protect us all." "Protect?" Ricardo laughed bitterly. "You stole my life. You stole my mother." Helena reached out a trembling hand, touching her son's face. "But now we are together again, my little Ricky, and I have more proof. I have saved everything I could. Letters, photographs. It's all hidden here." The director, who had been watching the scene in silence, cleared her throat discreetly. "Mr. Muller, there's something else you need to know. The nursing home. Anton Muller is not just an investor, he's the real owner. Always has been." Ricardo felt his blood boil in his veins. His own biological father had financed his mother's imprisonment for all these years, and now he, without knowing it, had almost become an accomplice by trying to buy and demolish the place. Ricardo spent the night awake, rereading Helena's diary page by page. Each word revealed a story of manipulation and lies that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. The next morning, his driver took him to the imposing headquarters of Muller Companies. It was time to confront Anton. The receptionist tried to stop him, but Ricardo stormed through the lobby. He knew the building well. He had done many deals there. But now, everything seemed different. The photographs of Anton Muller on the walls took on new meaning. That stern face, those determined eyes, how had he not noticed the resemblance before? "Sir, you can't come in," the secretary shouted as he pushed open the doors to the main office. Anton Muller was standing by the picture window, his hands clasped behind his back. Hearing the commotion, he turned slowly. His normally impassive face showed a flash of a surprise when he saw Ricardo. "What a pleasant surprise," Anton said, his voice controlled. "To what do I owe the honor of this visit?" Ricardo threw the diary on the marble table. "The theater is over, Anton. Or should I call you father?" "Yam." Silence that followed was deafening. Anton took the diary in steady hands, his eyes skimming the pages quickly. His expression didn't change, but a throbbing vein in his temple betrayed his tension. "I see Rafaela failed to keep her side of the bargain," he said finally, closing the diary. "I always knew she was the weak link in the plan." "Plan?" Ricardo laughed humorlessly. "Is that what you call the destruction of my mother's life, a plan?" Anton walked around the table, pouring himself a drink. He offered another to Ricardo, who declined with a brusque gesture. "You don't understand, kid. In 1998, I was about to close the biggest deal of my life, the merger that made Mueller Companies what it is today. One scandal would destroy everything." "So you decided to destroy my family instead?" "Destroy?" Anton raised an eyebrow. "Look at you, education at the best schools, a brilliant career, influence, power. Rafaela did her part, turned you into a successful man." Ricardo stepped forward, pounding his fist on the table. "What about my mother? Locked up in that asylum, drugged alone. You financed that place just to keep her locked up." "It was necessary," Anton replied coldly. "Helena was unstable. She was threatening to tell the press everything. Rafaela suggested hospitalization as a temporary solution until things calmed down. Then it became easier to keep her there." "Easier?" Ricardo's voice shook with anger. "You are a monster." "I'm a practical man," Anton corrected. "And now that you know everything, we have to be practical again. How much do you want to keep this quiet? Name a price." Ricardo felt his stomach turn. This man, this cold and calculating being, was his biological father. The same blood ran through his veins. Could he also be capable of such cruelty? "I don't want your money," he said finally. "I want justice." Anton laughed, a mirthless sound. "Justice? And how do you intend to achieve that? Your word against mine? The word of a woman who has been institutionalized for decades against one of the most powerful men in the country?" "I have proof," Ricardo replied, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "Mateo, my investigator, found everything. The forged documents, the suspicious bank transfers, the doctored medical records, and there's more, recordings. The nurse from the first hospital kept everything." Anton's face lost some of its color. "You wouldn't do that. You would destroy, not only me, but the entire empire that is rightfully yours as well." "My right," Ricardo approached, looking his father in the eyes. "The only right I want is to give back to my mother everything you stole from her, and believe me, I won't stop until I get it." At that moment, the office door opened again. Rafaela walked in, panting, her normally composed face marked with panic. "Anton, Helena, she's completely recovered her memory. She's talking to a journalist right now." Chaos broke out in Anton Mueller's office. Rafaela was trying to explain, between sobs, that a young investigative journalist had managed to enter the asylum by posing as a volunteer. Helena, in a moment of absolute lucidity, was telling everything. "We need to act fast," Rafaela pleaded, grabbing Anton's arm. "We can still stop the publication. Use your media contacts." "No," Ricardo's voice cut through the air like a blade. "No more manipulations, no more lies." Anton picked up the phone, his hands shaking slightly. "I can end this journalist's career with a single call. No media outlet would dare." Ricardo snatched the phone from his father's hands. "Don't you understand yet? It's over. Your empire of lies is crumbling." "You're just like me," Anton snapped, losing his composure for the first time. "Look at yourself, the way you conduct business, the way you crush your competition, the way you plan to demolish that asylum without regard for the consequences. You're my son whether you like it or not." The words hit Ricardo like a punch to the gut. It was true, for years he had followed in Anton's footsteps, building his own empire at the expense of others. The asylum, he would have done exactly what his father had done, destroyed lives for the sake of profit. "You're wrong," Ricardo replied, his voice firm. "I may have your blood, but I'm not you, and I'm going to prove it." He picked up his cell phone and dialed a number. "Hello, Carlos. This is Ricardo Muller. Call a press conference immediately." Rafaela gasped. "What are you going to do?" "What should have been done a long time ago. Tell the truth." Anton stepped forward, threatening. "If you do this, you'll destroy everything. Years of work, billions in investment." "No," Ricardo interrupted. "I'm going to save something much more valuable. My humanity." 2 hours later, the lobby of the building was packed with journalists. TV cameras were broadcasting live. Ricardo stepped onto the small makeshift stage, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the lenses filming him. "My name is Ricardo Muller," he began, his voice clear and firm. "And today I have come to tell you a story that has been buried for 25 years, a story about power, greed, and the destruction of a family." In the front row, Anton and Rafaela watched, transfixed, as Ricardo laid bare the whole truth. He spared no details: the forged documents, the forced internment, the years of manipulation. When he finished, the silence was deafening. "As of today," he continued, "I renounce the Muller name and any inheritance linked to this empire. Instead, I announce the creation of the Helena Alves Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of institutional violence and abandonment." Camera flashes exploded like stars. At the back of the room, a young journalist smiled, her recorder capturing every word. Beside her, via a live broadcast on a tablet, Helena watched it all, tears of joy streaming down her face. "And to begin with," Ricardo concluded, "the Santa Clara Asylum will be completely renovated and transformed into the Foundation's first shelter and rehabilitation center, because some things are more important than money or power. Some things, like truth and love, cannot be bought or sold." Anton stood up abruptly and left, followed by his lawyers. Rafaela remained seated, silent tears streaming down her made-up face, and Ricardo, for the first time in a long time, felt truly free. The morning after the press conference dawned with Ricardo's name plastered across every headline. "Heir resigns from billion-dollar empire. The price of truth. Muller scandal, 25 years of secrets revealed." The phone wouldn't stop ringing, and his email inbox was overflowing with interview requests. But Ricardo had only one destination in mind that morning: the Santa Clara Asylum. When he arrived, he found Helena sitting in the garden, more lucid and serene than ever. The morning sun illuminated her face, highlighting a smile that he was beginning to recognize as his own. "My son," she said softly, holding out her arms. "You were so brave." Ricardo knelt beside her, holding her hands. "Forgive me for not finding out sooner, for almost—" "Shh," she interrupted him gently. "The important thing is that we found each other. The rest is in the past." The director of the asylum approached, carrying a briefcase. "Mr. Muller, excuse me, what should I call you now?" "Ricardo. Just Ricardo," he smiled. "And I've come to start the renovation project. This place is going to be transformed into something extraordinary." In the days that followed, the nursing home took on a new life. Architects, engineers, and decorators worked tirelessly. The elderly, far from being removed, were temporarily relocated to a modern and comfortable wing built especially for them. Helena watched everything with increasing interest. Her memory, previously fragmented by the forced medication, gradually returned. Each recovered memory was a treasure that she shared with her son. "Remember that house on the beach?" she asked one afternoon as they watched the garden work. "You loved building sandcastles. You always said you'd build real ones someday." Ricardo smiled, remembering flashes of those moments. "And I ended up building office buildings instead." "But now," Helena squeezed his hand, "you are building something much more important, a legacy of truth and justice." The Helena Alves Foundation began to take shape. Ricardo devoted every free minute to the project, transforming his business experience into something meaningful. The shelter would be just the beginning. There were already plans to expand the project to other cities. One afternoon, while he was reviewing projects in his new office, much more modest than the previous one, he received an unexpected visit. Raffaella was standing in the doorway, looking smaller and more fragile than ever. "Can I come in?" she asked hesitantly. Riccardo made an affirmative gesture, watching his aunt, no, not his aunt, his manipulator, approach with uncertain steps. "I came to say goodbye," she said, placing an envelope on the table. "I'm leaving the country. But first, I thought you should have this." Inside the envelope were more old photographs, documents and letters. "It's all the evidence I've kept over the years," Raffaella explained. "A part of me always knew that one day the truth would come out. Maybe I wanted it to happen." "Why?" Riccardo asked, his voice more tired than angry. "Why did you do all this?" Raffaella sat down, her hands shaking slightly. At first it was out of envy. Helena had always been the favorite, the prettiest, the most loved. When she got pregnant with Anton, I saw my chance to finally have everything I'd ever wanted. But then, she hesitated, tears shining in her eyes. "Then I grew attached to you truly, and with each passing year it became harder to tell the truth." "The truth always finds its way," Riccardo replied, thinking about how a simple encounter at the asylum had changed everything. "Yes," Raffaella stood up, adjusting her bag. "And now that it's come to light, I realize that I was never truly happy. With my lies. You're a better man than Anton and I ever were, Riccardo. Use that strength for good." She walked to the door, pausing for a moment. "Helena, tell her I'm sorry. For everything." After Raffaella left, Riccardo remained for a long time looking at the new photographs, images of a life that had been stolen from him, but that now, somehow, he was having the chance to rebuild. Autumn has arrived, painting the trees in the garden of the newly renovated Helena Alves shelter with shades of gold and red. 3 months have passed since the press conference that changed everything. Sensational headlines have been replaced by reports on the foundation's groundbreaking work. Helena, now living in a specially adapted suite at the center, was blossoming every day. Free from the medications that had kept her confused for so long, her mind was clearer than ever. She had become a kind of counselor for the other residents, sharing her story of overcoming challenges. "Look at this," she said to Riccardo one afternoon, showing him a newspaper. The article talked about how other institutions were taking inspiration from the center's model to implement changes in their own structures. "It's just the beginning," Riccardo replied, sitting down next to her on the garden bench. 3 more centers will open by the end of the year." Helena smiled proudly. "You have turned our story of pain into hope for others." "But," she hesitated, "what about Anton? Any news?" Riccardo sighed. After the scandal, Anton Müller had practically disappeared. His companies were under investigation, and rumors said he was in some European country, trying to protect what was left of his fortune. "He made one last attempt to contact us," Riccardo revealed. "His lawyers offered a deal. He would donate a significant amount to the foundation in exchange for our silence about other compromising details we discovered." "And you?" "I declined," Riccardo smiled. "Some things are priceless." Just then, a van arrived at the center. Several young volunteers got out, carrying musical instruments and art supplies. It was part of the new occupational therapy program that Riccardo had implemented. "Look," Helena pointed to a lady who was timidly approaching the music group. "That's Donna Celia. 3 months ago, she barely left her room. Now..." The lady picked up a guitar, her trembling fingers strumming chords of an old song. Other residents began to approach, some humming along, others just watching with smiles on their faces. "Do you know what moves me the most?" Helena continued, her eyes shining, "seeing how each person here is recovering their own story, their dignity, just like what happened to me." Riccardo held his mother's hand, feeling the soft texture of her aged skin. How many moments like this had been stolen from them? But instead of bitterness, he now felt only gratitude for the chance to rebuild that bond. "Mommy," he said softly, the word still sounding new on his lips. Remember the little bluebird song? Helena smiled, her wrinkles deepening gently. How could I forget? It was the first memory that reconnected me to you. I found the sheet music among the documents Raffaella left. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I thought we could teach it to the music group, turn our song into something bigger. Helena's eyes filled with tears. Oh, Ricky. A soft melody began to play, brought by the young musicians who had been secretly rehearsing for weeks for this moment. Helena closed her eyes, letting herself be carried away by the music she herself had composed so many years ago for her little son. Other residents approached, drawn by the melody. Some began to sing along, creating spontaneous harmonies. The garden filled with music and smiles. See? Ricardo whispered. Some stories don't need to have an ending. They just turn into new beginnings. And there, under the soft autumn sun, mother and son shared much more than just a song. They shared the certainty that, even after years of separation and lies, true love always finds its way back. A winter morning brought with it more than just the cold characteristic of the season. Matteo, the private investigator who had helped unravel the whole story, arrived at the reception center with a serious expression on his face and a thick folder under his arm. I found something you need to see, he told Ricardo, who was supervising the installation of a new heating system. It's about your father and other cases like your mother's. In the office, Matteo spread out several documents on the table. They were records from other institutions, all directly or indirectly linked to Anton Müller. In each of them, similar. Stories inconvenient people who had been silenced over the years. Your father. He turned it into a system, Matteo explained. The Santa Clara Asylum was not an isolated case. There was a whole network of institutions used to hide people who threatened their interests. Ricardo felt his stomach turn. How many? So far I've identified 17 confirmed cases. People who were hospitalized against their will, some of them still alive, others... Matteo hesitated. Well, not all of them were as lucky as your mother. Helena, who had insisted on attending the meeting, held a rosary between her trembling fingers. I knew I was not alone. Sometimes, when I was more lucid, I would hear stories, whispers about others like me. Ricardo walked to the window, looking out over the garden where residents were taking part in a yoga session. His work with the foundation had only scratched the surface of a much larger problem. We have to do something, he said, turning to Matteo. We can't leave these people alone. I figured you'd say that, Matteo smiled, pulling more documents out of his folder. That's why I took the liberty of starting a complete mapping. Names, dates, places, everything I could find is... here. Helena stood, her eyes shining with renewed strength. I can help many of those who passed through the asylum. I remember them, their stories, their fears, their broken dreams. But won't it be dangerous? Ricardo asked, worried. Anton might try to retaliate if... My son, Helena interrupted him gently. Fear is what has allowed this system to exist for so long. We cannot let it continue to win. That same afternoon, Ricardo called a meeting with his foundation staff. The center's conference room was packed. Social workers, psychologists, lawyers, and volunteers, all listening intently as he explained the situation. Our mission has just expanded, he announced. We're no longer just talking about a nursing home or a family story. We're talking about an institutionalized system of silencing that we need to dismantle. A young lawyer raised her hand. But how do we do that? These institutions probably have legal protection, documentation. That seems to be in order. The same way we did here, Helena replied, her voice surprisingly steady. With truth, persistence, and love. Ricardo nodded, picking up one of the photographs Matteo had brought. It was a picture of a lady in a wheelchair, her gaze lost through a barred window. Every person in these institutions is someone like my mother, he said. Someone who has had their life, their voice, and their dignity stolen. And just as we were able to reconnect my mother with her story, we will do the same for them. The meeting stretched into the night, with the team developing strategies and action plans. Helena contributed her memories, helping to identify patterns and connections that documents alone could not reveal. When they finally finished, it was already past midnight. Ricardo accompanied Helena to her room, noticing how she seemed more energized than ever. "You know," she said, pausing in the doorway, "when you were little, you always said you wanted to be a hero. I remember you running around the house with a towel tied around your neck, saying you were going to save the world." Ricardo smiled, vaguely remembering those moments. "What now?" "Now you're doing just that." She touched his face tenderly. "Not with a cloak, but with something much more powerful. The truth." That evening, as the snow began to fall softly outside, Ricardo remained in his office, poring over the documents Matteo had left behind. Each page revealed a new story of injustice, a new challenge to be faced. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, he felt a growing determination. His father had built an empire based on lies and silence. Now it was time to build something different, a network of hope, truth, and redemption. The news came on a Thursday morning. Anton Müller had suffered a stroke in his hideout in Switzerland. Doctors were cautious in their prognoses, but one thing was certain: he could no longer escape the consequences of his actions. Ricardo received the information with a mix of emotions that he could not name. Helena, next to him at the breakfast table, held his hand firmly. "You don't have to go," she said softly. "I do," he replied, surprising himself. "Not for him, but for me, for us." The flight to Zurich was long and silent. At the hospital, Ricardo found a man very different from the powerful tycoon he had met months earlier. Anton was hooked up to life support, vulnerable, all too human. "Son," he whispered with difficulty when he saw Ricardo. "I didn't come." "As your son," Ricardo replied, sitting down beside the bed. "I came as a representative of all the people you've harmed over the years." Anton closed his eyes, a lone tear rolling down his face. I always knew that one day I would have to pay for everything." "This is not about payment," Ricardo pulled some documents out of his folder. "This is about reparations. The Foundation identified 17 people you illegally interned. Some are still alive, others have left devastated families. I've come to propose a deal. Agreement? Your companies will be converted into a trust fund. All proceeds will go toward finding and helping your victims, as well as maintaining and expanding shelters. This is your chance to turn your legacy of pain into something positive." Anton was silent for a long moment, staring out the hospital window at the snow-capped Swiss Alps. Finally, his hand shaking, he took the pen Ricardo offered. How is your mother?" he asked as he signed the documents. "She's fine, happy, free." Ricardo put the papers away. "And you know what's most amazing? She doesn't hold grudges. She says that anger only keeps us prisoners of the past." She was. "Always better than all of us," Anton muttered. Upon returning to the country, Ricardo found a surprise waiting for him at the Welcome Center. Helena had organized a special celebration. It was the anniversary of the Bluebird song. The garden was decorated with blue ribbons, and the residents had prepared a special performance. The choir, made up of senior citizens and volunteers, sang the melody that had connected mother and son through the years of separation. "See," said Helena, hugging her son as they watched the performance. "Our song now belongs to all of them too. Each note carries a story of overcoming." Ricardo looked around at the smiling faces. There were not only the original residents of the old asylum, but also some of the people they had managed to rescue from other institutions. Each of them carried invisible scars, but also an impressive inner strength. "You know, Mum," he said, "when I started all this, I thought I was just righting a personal wrong, but now I understand it was something much bigger. Love has that power." Helena smiled. "It starts as a small seed, a lullaby, a look of recognition, a gesture of kindness, and grows into a force that can change the world." Soft music filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter and conversation. There in that garden he had once planned to demolish, Ricardo finally understood. His true legacy lay not in the skyscrapers he had built or the fortunes he had amassed, but in the smiles he had helped restore, the families he had helped reconnect, the stories he had helped rewrite. It was a legacy built not with bricks and mortar, but with truth, compassion, and unconditional love. A legacy that, unlike corporate empires, could never be torn down. Spring brought with it not only flowers to the garden of the shelter center, but also an unexpected visitor. Clara, the young journalist who had helped expose the truth months, Thiago returned with an intriguing proposal. "I want to document the stories," she explained, sitting in Ricardo's office with her inseparable notebook. "Not just yours and Donna Helena's, but all the people who have been silenced. Turn it all into a documentary book." Helena, who was attending the meeting, leaned forward with interest. "Like a living memorial?" "Exactly," Clara smiled. "Something that ensures these stories are never forgotten or repeated." Ricardo watched through the window as a group of residents took part in a gardening class, one of the new therapeutic activities implemented at the center. Among them was Donna Miriam, one of the elderly women rescued from another institution controlled by Anton. In just 3 months at the center, she had recovered not only her voice, but also her smile. "We would have to be very careful," he said. "Some of these people are still processing their trauma. So I thought I'd do something different," Clara explained. "Instead of formal interviews, we could create sharing circles, small groups where people feel safe to tell their stories at their own pace." Helena clapped her hands softly. "Like our choir. You know, Ricardo, music has opened so many hearts here. Maybe we can combine the two." The idea grew organically. Within a few weeks, the center launched memory and music circles, weekly, gatherings where residents and their families could share their stories through words and songs. It was during one of these meetings that Donna Miriam revealed something surprising. While the group sang an old children's song, she began to cry. "That song," she said, her voice breaking, "I used to sing it to my little daughter before they took me away." The silence that followed was respectful, welcoming. Helena, sitting next to her, held her hand. "How long has it been?" he asked softly. 22 years old, Miriam replied. "She was only 5 when I challenged Mr. Muller's business dealings. She was the company's accountant. I discovered irregularities when I threatened to report it." Her voice trailed off. Ricardo, who was observing the circle discreetly, felt his heart tighten. Another life destroyed by his biological father's empire. "Your daughter," he said, coming closer. "We can try to find her." Miriam's eyes filled with hope. "After so long?" "The Foundation has resources, contacts," Ricardo explained. "If she's out there, we'll find her." Clara, who had been quietly taking notes in her corner, realized that she was faced with yet another powerful chapter for her book. It was not just a story of a mother and son reunited, but of multiple circles of healing, forming, and expanding. In 2 ways. The following weeks, the search for Donna Miriam's daughter mobilized the entire Foundation team. Matteo, the investigator, delved into old records. The legal team reached out to contacts. Helena organized a prayer group. "It's amazing," she said to Ricardo one night as they reviewed reports in the office, "how every story we uncover leads to other stories, other families torn apart." "Like circles on water," he replied, remembering how it all started with a simple encounter in the hallway of the nursing home. "Exactly," Helena smiled, her eyes shining with that wisdom that only years can bring. "And do you know what's most beautiful? Every circle of pain we close opens a new circle of hope." Ricardo watched his mother, admiring how she could see beauty even in the most difficult situations. It was this gaze, this ability to see beyond the surface, that was transforming the center into much more than just a place of welcome. "Mom," he called softly, "do you think we'll ever be able to fix everything, find everyone, reconnect all the families?" Helena got up and walked to the window, looking at the lights in the garden where some residents were still talking in small groups. "We may not be able to fix everything," she replied, after a moment. "But every story we rescue, every family we reunite, every memory we preserve, is a victory against oblivion. And sometimes, my son, it is these small victories that change the world." The news came on a Thursday afternoon, when the center was particularly busy with preparations for a music festival. Matteo burst into Ricardo's office, out of breath and with a smile on his face. "We found her," he announced. "Donna Miriam's daughter, Bianca. She's alive. She lives in the countryside." Ricardo jumped to his feet. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Matteo spread some documents on the table. "She was raised by a maternal aunt and grew up believing that her mother had abandoned the family. Today she is a music teacher at a public school." Music. Ricardo smiled, thinking about how some bonds persist through time. "Does she know about her mother?" "Not yet. We think it's best for you and the foundation team to approach with caution." The following days were filled with intense preparation. The team of psychologists at the center developed a careful plan for the reunion. Helena, with her unique sensitivity, helped Donna Miriam process the news and prepare herself emotionally. "It's like a dream," the lady said, her hands shaking as she held a current photograph of Bianca. "My girl, a music teacher." Clara, the journalist, documented everything with her sensitive gaze, capturing the small moments that built this great story of redemption. One afternoon, while watching Helena rehearsing with Donna Miriam the lullaby she used to sing to Bianca, Clara realized something profound. "It's not just about reconnecting families," she told Ricardo. "It's about reconnecting people with their own stories, their own voices." The reunion was planned to take place during the center's music festival. Bianca was invited as a guest teacher, unaware that her mother would be there. The young woman arrived on a sunny morning, carrying her guitar and a genuine curiosity about the foundation's work. Ricardo welcomed her personally. "Welcome to the Helena Alves Reception Center." "You guys do an incredible job here," Bianca said, looking around at the manicured gardens and smiling residents. "When I got the invitation, I researched the history of the place. It's almost unbelievable how it all started. With a song," Helena added, approaching, "a simple lullaby that reconnected a child with its mother." Bianca smiled, slinging her guitar over her shoulder. "I love stories like that. You know, I also grew up with a special song. My aunt used to say it was the only thing that calmed me down when I was little, although she never knew the full words." Helena exchanged a meaningful look with Ricardo. It was time. "Perhaps," she said softly, "you would like to meet someone who knows all the words to that song?" They led Bianca to the winter garden, where Donna Miriam was waiting, trembling with emotion. When she saw her daughter, she began to hum softly the same melody that Bianca had just mentioned. The young teacher froze. That voice, that complete melody. Tears began to stream down her face as long-buried memories came flooding back to the surface. "Mommy?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The embrace that followed was witnessed in respectful silence by all present. Mother and daughter, separated by decades of lies, finally reunited by the music that never stopped echoing in their hearts. Clara discreetly photographed the moment. Helena held Ricardo's hand, both of them moved by yet another reconstituted family, another circle of pain transformed into hope. "This is how we heal the world," Helena whispered. "One story, one song, one hug at a time." Ricardo watched the scene, thinking about how his own reunion with Helena had triggered this whole wave of transformation. From a simple encounter in a nursing home hallway, a force capable of reconnecting, lives, rebuilding stories, and restoring the dignity of so many people had been born. And the music, always the music, weaving the invisible threads that held all these stories together. The success of the reunion between Donna Miriam and Bianca had repercussions far beyond the walls of the shelter center. Within a few weeks, the foundation began receiving dozens of calls and emails from people searching for family members who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. "It's bigger than we imagined," Ricardo said during an emergency meeting with his team. "Every story we uncover reveals 10 more. Helena, who was now actively involved in the running of the foundation, leafed through a stack of letters she had received. "Look at this one," she pointed to one in particular. "It's From a retired nurse who worked at 5 different institutions controlled by Anton, she kept records of everything. The nurse, Donna Conceção, arrived at the center on a rainy Monday morning. She was a small, delicate lady, carrying an old suitcase full of meticulously organized notebooks. "I knew that one day someone would want to know the truth," she said, opening one of the notebooks. "So I recorded every suspicious admission, every questionable procedure, every story I heard in the hallways during my shifts." Ricardo and Helena spent hours with Donna Conceção, delving into her notes. The notebooks revealed a frightening pattern. Businessmen, journalists, lawyers, anyone who posed a threat to the business of Anton or his associates ended up hospitalized with dubious diagnoses. "But why didn't you ever report it?" asked Clara, who was documenting everything for her book. Conceção smiled sadly. "I tried at first, but I soon discovered that Mr. Muller's network of influence was extensive. Police, justice, press, they all had their price. So I decided to do what I could, document everything and wait for the right moment." Meanwhile, in the garden of the center, Bianca had started a special project with the residents. Using her experience as a music teacher, she created a songwriting workshop where each participant could turn their story into a song. "It's incredible," she told Ricardo during a break. "Every melody we create here carries a story of resistance. These are people who tried to silence themselves, but who never lost their inner music." Bianca's project soon became one of the most popular in the center. Residents who had previously barely spoken were now singing their stories. Donna Miriam, in particular, flourished alongside her daughter, their voices harmonizing in duets that moved everyone. One afternoon, while watching a choir rehearsal, Helena had an idea. "What if we expanded this?" she proposed during dinner with Ricardo. "Transform each foundation center into a space not only for welcoming, but for artistic expression." Ricardo smiled, recognizing in his mother's eyes that special glow that always appeared when she was really excited about something. "Like this? Well, music worked for us, didn't it? It was through music that we reconnected. And now look, how it's helping others reconnect with their own stories." The idea began to take shape. In partnership with Bianca and other professionals, the foundation developed a program called Voices of Memory. Each reception center would have its own cultural space with classes in music, theater, visual arts, and literature. "We cannot change the past," Helena explained during the inauguration of the first cultural space, "but we can transform pain into art, silence into music, memories into hope." Clara, who continued to document everything, realized that her book was taking an unexpected turn. "It's no longer just a story of denunciation," she told Ricardo. "It's a story of collective transformation." Donna Conceção's notes also bore important fruit. Based on her records, the Foundation's legal team began mapping the entire network of institutions involved in Anton's scheme. It was meticulous and often painful work, but necessary. "Every name in these notebooks is a life cut short," Ricardo said during an interview, "and our mission is to restore not only the historical truth, but most importantly the dignity of these people." One night, after a particularly intense day of work, Helena found Ricardo in his office immersed in documents. "You know what moves me the most?" she said, sitting down next to her son. "Seeing how that moment in the hallway of the nursing home when I sang his lullaby planted such a powerful seed." Ricardo held his mother's hand, feeling its soft texture. "A seed that continues to bear fruit." "Yes," Helena smiled. "And every new story we uncover, every family we reunite, every voice we free, it's like we're planting more seeds of hope in the world." Clara's book was launched on an autumn afternoon at a special event held in the garden of the Welcome Center. Voices of Silence, the story of a reunion that changed many lives, quickly became a bestseller, capturing the attention of the entire country. "It's not just a book," Helena said at the launch. "It's a testament to how love can overcome decades of silence and lies." The event brought together many of the people whose stories were recorded in the pages, Donna Miriam and Bianca, who now coordinated the music therapy program in all of the ECE Foundation centers, Donna Conceição, whose courage in keeping records had helped to uncover the entire network of compromised institutions and dozens of families who had been reunited thanks to the Foundation's work. During the ceremony, Ricardo surprised everyone with an important announcement. With the help of Donna Conceição's records and the tireless work of our legal team, we were able to identify more than 50 institutions involved in the silencing scheme, he revealed. And today, I am pleased to announce that all of them will be transformed into new reception and culture centers. The news was greeted with emotional applause. Helena, sitting in the front row, wept silently, moved to see how her personal story had been transformed into a movement of such profound change. After the event, while the guests were still chatting animatedly in the gardens, Ricardo found his mother sitting on her favorite bench, watching the sunset. "What are you thinking?" "About?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "How life takes turns," Helena replied, her gaze lost in the orange horizon. "When I was locked up here, I dreamed of recovering my voice, my story. I never imagined that this dream would end up giving so many other people their voices back." At that moment, Bianca began playing the guitar in one of the garden's gazebos. Soon other voices joined hers, creating a spontaneous harmony that echoed through the flower beds. "Do you recognize this song?" Helena asked, smiling. Ricardo closed his eyes, letting the melody wash over him. It was the song of the little bluebird, but different from how he remembered it. There were new arrangements, new voices, transforming the old lullaby into something bigger and deeper. "It's amazing how a simple melody can carry so many meanings," he reflected. "It's not just a melody," Helena corrected gently. "It's a symbol of resistance. When they locked me in here, they tried to make me forget this song just as they tried to make me forget who I was. But the song remained." Clara, who was discreetly photographing the moment, approached with her new project in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I wanted to share something with you. I'm starting a documentary series about reunion stories. Each episode will focus on a different family, showing how the Foundation's work is impacting lives across the country." Ricardo smiled, thinking about how each new initiative seemed to spawn others like ripples expanding across a pond. "Do you know what impresses me the most?" he commented. "How each person we help ends up becoming part of the solution. Donna Miriam and Bianca with their music, Donna Conceição with her recordings, you with your books and documentaries." "This is how big changes happen," Helena said, standing up to join the impromptu choir. "Not all at once, but person by person, story by story, song by song." As night fell gently over the garden, voices continued to rise in harmony. There, in that space that had once been a symbol of silence and oppression, now echoed songs of hope and freedom. And Ricardo, watching his mother sing along with everyone else, realized that he had built something much more valuable than any business empire, a community of people who, together, were rewriting their stories and transforming scars into stars. The success of Clara's book and the impact of the Foundation's work attracted international attention. One spring morning, Ricardo received an email that would once again change the course of his mission. The UN wanted to learn about the project so it could be replicated in other countries. "It's an incredible opportunity," Helena commented as they organized the presentation. "To think that our story can help people beyond borders." The UN delegation arrived on a sunny Wednesday. Among the visitors was Diana Martinelli, a representative of an Argentine human rights organization who carried a thick folder of documents. "We have similar cases in my country," she explained during the meeting. "People who disappeared during the military regime, families separated. Many stories still need to be told." Helena, who was attending the meeting, felt her heart tighten. "The stories may be different, but the pain is the same," she said softly. Diana nodded, opening her folder. "That's why we're here. The model you've created using art and music to reconnect people with their stories, it's exactly what we need." As the meeting continued, another session of the Voices of Memory program was taking place in the garden of the center. Bianca led a choir made up of residents and family members, their voices rising in a new composition, created collectively. "Every note is a story," she explained to visitors watching the performance. "Every harmony is a reunion." The delegation was particularly impressed by the therapeutic results of the program. Reports showed significant improvements not only in the emotional well-being of participants, but also in their physical health and cognitive ability. "It's as if the music unlocks something inside them," one of the experts commented. "Memories that seemed lost come back to the surface. Connections are remade." Ricardo, observing the impact that the work had on visitors, remembered how it all began, with a simple lullaby in a dark corridor. "You know," he told Diana during a break, "when I started all this, I thought I was just resolving a personal issue. I never imagined it would go this far." Diana smiled understandingly. "The greatest changes often begin that way, with a personal story that resonates with other stories." In the afternoon, the delegation participated in a special session of the Memory Circles. One of the center's oldest residents, Donna Celine, shared her story for the first time. "I spent 30 years believing I was crazy," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "That the memories I had were just delusions. But here I learned that my memories are real, that my story matters." Diana's eyes filled with tears. In her country, stories like this were painfully familiar. By the end of the day, the TICO delegation had made its decision. The UN would not only support the international expansion of the project, but would also create a special fund to finance similar initiatives in other countries. "But on one condition," Diana said, smiling. "We want you to be direct consultants. Your experience, especially the human side of the project, is invaluable." Helena, who was listening to everything next to her son, squeezed his hand discreetly. "See? The echo of that song continues to spread." That night, after the delegation left, Ricardo found his mother in the garden watering the flowers she had planted months ago. "What do you think?" he asked. "About expanding the project internationally?" Helena stopped for a moment, watching a butterfly that landed delicately on one of the flowers. "Do you know what happened to me?" she replied. "When I was trapped here, I felt so alone, so isolated, as if my pain was unique in the world. But now I see that there are so many other people going through the same thing, in so many different places. And now we can help them," Ricardo added. "Yes," Helena smiled, going back to watering her flowers. "And more than that, we can show them that they are not alone, that their stories deserve to be heard, their voices deserve to be freed." A gentle breeze blew through the garden, carrying the scent of flowers and the distant sound of the choir still rehearsing. It was as if the air itself was charged with possibilities, with stories yet to be told, with songs yet to be sung. The international expansion of the project brought new challenges and discoveries. Diana returned from Argentina with stories that resonated deeply with the center's experiences. Families separated for political reasons, people institutionalized to silence their voices, lives interrupted by powerful interests. "It's as if we were discovering pieces of a much larger puzzle," Ricardo said during a video conference with representatives from several countries. "Each story that emerges connects with others, forming a mosaic of resistance and hope." Helena, who had taken on a central role in training the international teams, developed a special methodology based on her own experience. "It's not enough to just bring families together," she explained in an online workshop. "We need to create safe spaces where memories can emerge naturally, where trauma can be transformed into art, where silence can become music." The Voices of Memory program was adapted to different cultural contexts. In Chile, they incorporated traditional dances. In Mexico, local crafts. In South Africa, they told ancestral stories. Each country added elements of its own culture to the original model. "It's fascinating to see how each place makes its own project," observed Bianca, who traveled regularly to train teams of music therapists. "Music especially seems to have a universal language when it comes to healing emotional wounds." One afternoon, While supervising the installation of video conferencing equipment to connect the different international centers, Ricardo received surprising news. Anton had woken up from a coma in Switzerland. "He's asking for you," the doctor said over the phone, "and for Helena." The request took mother and son by surprise. After a long conversation, they decided to make the trip. Not for Anton, but for themselves, to definitively close that chapter of their lives. At the hospital in Zurich, they found a changed man. Anton, once so imposing and authoritative, now looked small and fragile in his hospital bed. "I have been following your work," he said weakly. "What you have built is far greater and more important than any empire I have created." Helena, sitting beside the bed, held the hand of the man who had caused so much harm. "It was never about empires," she said softly. "It was always about human connections." "I know," Anton replied, tears streaming down his weathered face. "And that's why I want to do one last thing right. I've instructed my lawyers to transfer all of my remaining assets to the foundation. Use them to continue this work." Ricardo watched the scene with mixed emotions. The man before him was no longer the powerful tycoon who had destroyed so many lives, but he wasn't exactly his father either. He was just a human being facing the consequences of his choices. "Thank you," he said simply, "not for us, but for all the people we can help with these resources." When they returned to the country, they found the center vibrating with a special energy. It was the day of a simultaneous international concert. All the centers around the world connected by video conference, each contributing their own songs and stories. On the main screen, faces of different nationalities smiled and sang together. The song of the little bluebird that had started it all was now being translated into Spanish, English, Afrikaans, Mandarin, each adaptation carrying its own story of loss and redemption. "It's amazing," Helena whispered, watching the harmony that formed between so many different voices. "How a little lullaby can grow into a worldwide symphony." Ricardo hugged his mother, feeling the power of that moment. What had begun as a personal search for truth and justice had become a global movement of healing and reconnection. And there, surrounded by music and hope, mother and son understood that some stories have no ending. They just turn into new beginnings, echoing through time and space, touching hearts and changing lives, one note at a time. 5 years have passed since that first meeting in the hallway of the nursing home. The Helena Alves Shelter Center, once a place of shadows and silence, was now a beacon of hope known worldwide. On that special spring morning, the place was especially busy. It was the day of the inauguration of the Memorial da Memoria. The new space, built on the site of the old wing of the asylum, was a work of art in itself. Its glass walls allowed natural light to flood the space, and each room told a different story through photographs, documents, and interactive art installations. "It's as if the building itself is breathing now," Helena said, walking through the space with Ricardo. At 75, she still had that special sparkle in her blue eyes, even though her hair was completely white. The memorial was the brainchild of Clara, who over the years continued to document the stories that emerged. "We couldn't let these memories be lost," she explained to visitors arriving for the inauguration. "Every story here is a testament to resilience and love." At the entrance to the memorial, a sound installation softly played different versions of the Bluebird song, recorded in different languages and arrangements. It was a constant reminder of how it all began. "I remember the day I heard your voice in that hallway," Ricardo said, pausing in front of an old photograph of the asylum. "I was so determined to tear this place down." Helena smiled, holding her son's hand. "And instead, you built something much more valuable." The inauguration brought together people from all over the world. Donna Miriam and Bianca, who now coordinated an international music therapy network, led a special performance with a choir made up of residents from different centers. Diana brought a delegation from Argentina, including families who had been reunited thanks to the foundation's work together. Among them was Juan, an 80-year-old man who had found his sister after 45 years of separation. "You didn't just give us back our stories," he said during his emotional speech. "You gave us back our humanity." One of the most striking rooms in the memorial was dedicated to Donna Conceicão's records. Her meticulous notes, now digitized and organized, had become a crucial historical archive for understanding how systems of oppression operate through silencing. Each page of these notebooks, Conceição herself explained to a group of students, is a cry of resistance against oblivion. Late in the afternoon, when most of the visitors had already left, Ricardo found his mother sitting on the same bench where she used to sit years ago. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting down beside her. "How life takes turns," Helena replied, her gaze lost on the horizon. "You know, during all those years I spent locked up here, I clung to the memories of you as a little boy. It was the only thing that kept me alive, the hope that one day I would be able to tell you the truth." Ricardo held his mother's hand, feeling its soft texture marked by time. "And now," she continued, "we've not only reclaimed our history, but we've helped so many other people reclaim theirs." In the garden, a few children were playing, children and grandchildren of staff and residents. One of them, a girl of about 5, was absently humming a version of the Bluebird song. "It's amazing how stories survive," Ricardo observed, "how they find ways to keep being told." Helena nodded, watching the girl. "That's why this memorial is so important. It's not just a museum of sad memories. It's a living reminder that there's always hope. There's always the possibility of starting over." At that moment, Bianca approached with her guitar. "It's time," she said softly. It was time for the ritual that had become a tradition at the center. Every afternoon at sunset, people gathered in the garden to sing together. It was a moment of celebration, of connection, of collective healing. And as the first notes of the Bluebird's song filled the air, Helena looked at her son and smiled, knowing that they had built something that transcended their own lives. A legacy of love, truth, and redemption that would continue to echo through generations. The sun rose once again over the Helena Alves Shelter Center, its first rays gently touching the new Memorial da Memoria. It was a special day. A decade had passed since that fateful encounter in the hallway of the old asylum. Helena, now 80, still maintained her routine of watering the flowers in her garden every morning. Her pure white hair shone in the golden light of dawn, and her blue eyes, the same ones that had recognized her son so many years ago, were still vivid and bright. "Every flower here has a story," she explained to a group of international visitors. "Like people, they need care, attention, and most importantly, freedom to grow." The foundation had become a respected international organization, with centers in more than 30 countries. The model developed by Helena and Ricardo was studied at universities and replicated by humanitarian organizations around the world. On that special morning, Ricardo arrived early at the center, carrying a surprise, the original manuscript of the Bluebird song, found among his mother's belongings in the old asylum. "Look what I found," he said, showing the yellowed paper to Helena. She touched the manuscript with delicate fingers, tears of emotion shining in her eyes. "I wrote and rewrote this song every night so I wouldn't forget. It was my way of keeping you close to me." The paper, now framed, gained a special place in the memorial, next to an interactive installation where visitors could listen to different versions of the song in different languages and leave their own recorded stories. Clara, who continued to document the project's evolution, had transformed her documentary series into an international educational program. "Every story we document," she explained, "becomes a tool for social transformation." The Foundation's work had inspired significant changes in legislation in several countries, creating more rigorous mechanisms to protect against forced internment and the erasure of identities. Bianca, now director of the International Music Therapy Program, was conducting research on the power of music in recovering traumatic memories. Her mother, Dona Miriam, at 85 years old, was still an active participant in the senior citizens' choir. "Music," she often said, "is the language of the soul. When all other words fail, it finds a way to the heart." At dusk, as had become tradition, people of all ages gathered in the garden for the daily musical moment. Through large screens, reception centers from different countries connected to participate in the event. Ricardo watched it all with a mixture of pride and gratitude. The financial empire he had almost inherited from Anton had transformed into something much more valuable, a global network of healing and reconnection. Helena, sitting on her favorite bench, began to softly sing the song of the little bluebird. Her voice, though softer with age, still carried that same sweetness that had touched her son's heart in that hallway 10 years ago. Other voices joined hers, creating a harmony that transcended languages and borders. It was a living testament to how a simple lullaby could become a global movement of change. "You know, my son," Helena said, as the last notes faded into the evening air, "sometimes I think this is all a dream, that I will wake up back in that dark room, alone with my memories." Ricardo held his mother's hand tenderly. "It's not a dream, Mom. It's our reality, a reality we built together, note by note, story by story." And so, beneath the starry sky, mother and son shared another precious moment, knowing that their story had become much more than a personal tale of redemption. It was now a symphony of hope that would continue to echo through time, touching hearts and transforming lives for generations to come.